Good evening, everyone. I'm Troy McKenzie. I have the honor and the privilege of being the Dean of NYU School of Law. And once again, it is my delight to welcome everyone to the 29th Annual Attorney General Robert Abrams Public Service Lecture. Yes, indeed. This has become a signature event on the law school's annual event calendar, and we are very, very happy and proud to host it here at NYU. For now nearly 3 decades, the Abrams Lecture Series has brought together some of the most distinguished voices in public service. It has served both as a forum for addressing pressing legal and policy questions, and also a way to celebrate one of the core values of this law school, a commitment to using the law in the service of the public good. We are especially honored to welcome the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Andrea Joy Campbell, who is with us this evening. And I look forward to hearing her insights and reflections. Bob Abrams will formally introduce her in just a moment. But before, let me just say again how thrilled we are to have Attorney General Campbell here. And we are deeply appreciative of her having taken the time out of her extraordinarily busy schedule to be with us this evening. But before we go any further, I want to introduce someone who has been the guiding light in this lecture series and someone who has given many years to public service, the Honorable Robert Abrams, an NYU Law alum. Bob is someone who has had an amazing career and one that any of us would be proud to replicate. He served in the state legislature, he served as Bronx Borough President, and then he served 4 terms as the Attorney General of the state of New York, and he was a transformational Attorney General. I know that word gets thrown around, transformational, but he truly was someone who took an important job and turned it into an essential one. He transformed the office into an advocate of fairness, of justice. He used it as a platform to advance consumer protection, environmental rights, civil rights, and indeed the ethical practice of finance and real estate. Along the way, many, many, many of his legislative proposals, both when he was in the legislature and later when he was Attorney General, were enacted into law. He continued in private practice as an advisor at the Strzok firm, is now in retirement, but has not stepped back from an active and engaged life, including by counseling attorneys general around the country, and indeed serving in a leadership position with the Retired Attorney Pro Bono program that reflects a lifelong dedication to public service. His career is one of integrity, energy, and a belief in the power of the law to make real change. So once again, Bob, thank you for everything you have done for this state, for the country, and for NYU Law, for establishing this remarkable lecture series. So once again, please join me in welcoming the Honorable Robert Abrams.
Dean, that was very, very gracious, very generous, overly so, but I accept it. It's really the dean that deserves a lot of recognition. It's his 3rd year. He's been around. His energy, his intellect, his leadership is recognized by the faculty, the students, the greater community. He's established a national reputation, and we at NYU have been very privileged and lucky to be able to have your leadership over these years. Thank you so much. It's not easy to put together a program like this, and I want to give recognition and thanks to Lisa Hoyes, the Assistant Dean for Clinical and Public Service, Clinical Education and Public Service here at the law school, and Maddie Dioka, who has done yeoman work to do all the things that bring us together, including making sure that our appetite is going to be satiated with a fantastic spread that we will enjoy within the hour. Gail Zweig, I want to thank you too for your continuing commitment and interest to this program. The need made reference to the fact that it's the 29th year. So let me give you a little background and interest how this all happened. John Sexton was the dean of NYU Law School. I knew him, and I came to him 30 years ago, and I said, Dean, I'm worried. I spent 28 wonderful years in public service and public life, and I get a sense that the young people today are getting turned off. The media is not good, and the visibility is not good in terms of those who are in politics. Once in a while, somebody betrays the public trust, and it gets this big headline, and there's a very negative feeling, and that's bad. We have to corral the energy, the idealism, the enthusiasm of the young people of our society if we're going to deal with the manifold problems that confront us. And the law school, NYU Law School, has continued to be a beacon to encourage young lawyers to come and enter public service. And you know, Dean, my experience has been different from what the public perception is. My experience has been that people in government and in politics are solid, they're good, they have a lot of ability, they have integrity. Now, once in a while, somebody crosses the line and does something bad, and of course, that's never to be condoned, it's to be condemned, and it's to be punished. But for the most part, I found my colleagues in politics and government to have great merit. So I think what we have to do is have students see public servants in the flesh. Have them meet these people. And so came the idea that once a year we would invite a distinguished person in public life to come and speak to students at the law school. And it has been extraordinary because we have had senators, governors, attorneys general, judges come and grace this dais, and students have been excited. They said, gee, that's a solid person. He or she has led the kind of life that perhaps I'd like to lead, and let me try to perhaps emulate that. And for the first speaker, the inaugural program was headed by a friend and a colleague, the former Attorney General of the state of Connecticut, the United States Senator from Connecticut, and a good friend, Joe Lieberman. He was the one who started the program 3 decades ago. And of course, he embodied everything that I thought public service should be all about. Decency, integrity, intellect, courage, independence. And so he kicked off this whole series of 29 events, which we're going to continue here tonight. And I have a special honor because with us tonight, Joe, unfortunately, was taken from us a little over a year ago. Too soon. We miss his voice. We need his voice. We need his presence in today's world. But with us tonight is his wife, Hadassah Lieberman, and I want to recognize her and have her stand up and take a bow. And I encourage you to chat with Hadassah during the reception. You'll be further inspired. Our speaker tonight is in the line of the 29 predecessor speakers, somebody very special, indeed extraordinary. Soon after being born, Her father was sentenced to 8 years in prison. When she was 8 months old, her mother was killed in an automobile accident on the way to visit her husband in prison. She and her 2 siblings spent their life in foster care, and members of the family took them in. During her tender young years, she was in 5 different schools in the Boston public school system, but ultimately winding up in the Boston Latin School, and then going on to Princeton, and then to UCLA Law School. Having graduated from law school, she spent a year in a public service organization, spent 2 years at the Proskauer Law Firm, a prestigious private law firm, then was Assistant General Counsel to Deval Patrick, the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and then ran for public office herself, getting elected to the city council. Her leadership qualities and her very significant essence was known and felt by her colleagues, and within a short period of time, she was elected president of the Common Council, the leader of the council in Boston, and then elected Attorney General of the great state of Massachusetts. As Attorney General, she has taken bold and courageous actions in a whole variety of areas, protecting a woman's right to choose, seeking criminal justice reform, being a supporter of charter schools, and trying to get increased assistance, mental assistance for young people in her state. And so it's an honor and a special privilege to be able to introduce you to a real hero to so many of us, the Attorney General of Massachusetts, Andrea Campbell.
Thank you, Bob, thank you. And of course, thank you to your incredible dean as well for your leadership. Delighted to be here with all of you. And I was just thinking about Frank Bellotti, right? And just folks who've come before, great AGs. And the dean did your introduction justice because you are still great. And it's an honor and privilege to be here with you, your family, and Mrs. Lieberman. It's an honor and privilege that you would attend and take time out of what can also be a busy schedule. So I'm really grateful, and I'm grateful to all of you fabulous, I always say young and fabulous young people who also are here, because I know it's busy. There's a lot that pulls at you. You could be in a million different places probably right now, so I never take it for granted that you would come and participate in this conversation, and to everyone else who's here, delighted. And thank you to the organizers who are doing our mics, our food, some of whom may be immigrants, just saying. I'm really grateful and honored to be here with each and every one of you. I won't talk at you long, because we're gonna sit over here and have a conversation. You just took half my bio, so I'll have to figure out how to tell the rest of my life over here. But this is me in the flesh, and I'm delighted to be here for just a few reasons. One, I do have a connection to New York. I actually was just with A.G. James, your incredible Attorney General, earlier today, because we are taking on a lot of collective fights. So I want to lift her up in her leadership. There's only been 4 Black women ever elected to AG in the country, and I'm the 4th. Tish was the 3rd, Kamala the 2nd, and Pamela from Indiana was the 1st. She often doesn't get any recognition, but Pamela Lane Carter was the 1st. So it's an honor and privilege to be here. And I lived in New York for a period of time. Actually, when I left Princeton University, I moved to New York when I was thinking about going to law school. So before I brought myself to happy, sunny California, I lived in downtown New York, near the courthouse, actually, and I worked at a maritime law firm as a paralegal for 2 years before deciding to go to law school in California. And then I returned and actually worked at Proskauer, which is based here in New York. Frankly, chose that firm. It's the only firm I ever worked with, given there's history, particularly the Jewish history, to be candid, and its work on civil rights. But it was a firm that was founded because Jewish folks were excluded from working at many other law firms because of the fact that they were Jewish. So it's a long and rich history. I had a 917 number then. According to Sex and the City, you can't get in those anymore. I recently had to change that to 617, which is Boston. because people didn't believe I was from Boston and I was born and raised in Boston because I had that 917 number. I do miss it, and I miss New York. I ended up moving back home to Boston, actually, because my husband, who's originally from Vermont, I don't know if he'd appreciate me saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway, would visit me in New York. He would commute down from Boston. We were long distance, and one day just had an epiphany. He's like, New York, it's too big. He's like, Boston is my New York. So I went back home, and by the grace of God, I'm glad I did, because I wouldn't be AG and the first Black woman to serve in this role and the first woman of color to win statewide office in Massachusetts if I didn't move back. But I can't give my husband all the credit. I do talk a lot about my twin brother, Andre, who sadly, after the passing of our mom, the passing of my dad, my twin brother would die over 13 years ago while in the custody of the Department of Correction, which oversees our prisons in Massachusetts, as a pretrial detainee waiting to go to trial. It never happened. And as a result of receiving inadequate health care, he would pass away in that system when he was 29 years old. And I still have loved ones who are incarcerated, including my older brother. And many would seek to use that story and that vulnerability against me, and I just say, bring it on. Because what I've known, I already knew it to be true, but every day it's confirmed and also attached to a deep sense of faith. I don't leave my house without reading my Bible and praying. That's my faith tradition, but that there's real power in our stories. Not only the connection we see across all type of demographics. It's okay. We're so happy you're here. I know your mom. She's fabulous. I know you love her. She's fabulous. But it's sharing our stories that only create deep connection across any demographic, including party lines, et cetera. But also, it's the power it gives us when we're really willing to be authentic in who we are and to share every facet of it. One, you might inspire someone else to do the same, and who knows what that inspiration could lead to. But most importantly, I think it also leads you to find your purpose. And it was my twin brother's death that really had me sort of think about the deeper questions, including while I was still at Proskauer. Why am I here? What are my unique gifts? What am I meant to use those gifts for? And I decided to leave that great law firm with no job lined up, nothing lined up. They thought I was absolutely crazy. And at that point, I had transferred from the New York office to the Boston office, so New York was calling me to say, come back. I said, no, because the person I'm dating won't let me come back. But ultimately decided to ask those deep questions, to step out with a leap of faith, and ended up landing a job as Deputy Legal Counsel for Governor Deval Patrick, he was the first Black governor in Massachusetts. And so I share all that because you just never know where your story can lead you, but if you don't have the frame of actually turning pain into purpose, you'll never know. And if you don't take leaps of faith, you really won't know. So it's an honor and privilege to be here. I won't talk at you the entire time because I know we're going to have this great conversation. I'll just end with two things that I think are important and see where the conversation leads us. But clearly, this is a difficult time in our country, to say the least. And I've been really honored of late to be spending a lot of time with lawyers and at large functions and association meetings. I was also at an event recently, lawyers concerned with other lawyers with respect to the mental health of our lawyers in our legal profession, as well as issues around substance use disorder, whatever it is, and the importance of reminding lawyers to take care of themselves. Because at the end of the day, it really is lawyers that are going to save the day. It's not to discount judges and thoughtful judges, but you can't go into court just looking cute and fabulous. They're going to ask you, excuse me, why are you here? And did you write something for me to review before you got here, right? You need to bring the substance, you need to bring the integrity, you need to bring excellence, and that's lawyers. So this is an exciting time to, I think, have the conversation with a darker context behind us. But I feel already the light in this room because I'm looking at all of your incredible faces, and what's possible for this generation and the next generation is actually remarkable if we look at the possibilities. And so I'm delighted to be here in this moment in time to really address you, to connect with you, and to have a deeper conversation about anything, I guess. I don't really know where this is going to lead, but I'll be honest, I promise that. But thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and privilege to be here. And thank you again to the Dean.
Attorney General Campbell, your life story is so compelling The odds were stacked against you. You faced so many obstacles. How did you overcome it?
Does this work? I'm all set. You hear me? Perfect. And thank you. We had some mic issues. I actually think that question is sort of my life's work, and when I figure the complete picture out, right, I will maybe write a book. I don't know. But I just want to even take a step back, because when I think about, so when my biological mom died, she was driving to go see my father, who was incarcerated at the time. And my father was incarcerated for the first 8 years of my life. They weren't actually married. That's a whole separate discussion. But during that time, we immediately actually lived with my grandmother, my mother's mother, who did the best she could. She struggled with alcoholism, and as a result of losing her daughter, you can imagine that was only exacerbated during that time. And so my grandmother stepped up. I had relatives that stepped up, even when we were in foster care, sort of this back and forth, usually when my grandmother was struggling. I had a host of other relatives, aunts and uncles that would step up. So I had other family members that saw the struggle and stepped up. So I have to give tremendous credit. Even to this day, post losing my father actually died. I met him when I was 8 years old for the first time. He did the best he could. He stressed the importance of education. He probably could have died the day I got accepted to Princeton, but he didn't because he was so excited. But he didn't live to see me graduate. I actually talked to him one morning. He died the same evening when I was a sophomore and I was 19 years old. And I can remember during that time, and even before and after, a lot of teachers and mentors who stepped up, and other relatives, my aunt and uncle, for example, who I call my parent figures today, who stepped up. So I just had an ecosystem of incredible human beings, some for a whole lifetime, some for a season or a moment, or an employer who became a dear friend who saw potential in me. So that is one piece. It's just people who looked out for me, right? The second is my faith. I talk about it because it is of significance to me. My aunt really planted seeds of faith. I'd go to church with her, and we went to a Pentecostal church, people falling out and speaking tongues. I don't fall out, and I don't speak tongues, but thank goodness the seeds were planted, because my faith, my prayer life, that foundation has sustained me, and if anything, only grown, especially after the loss of my twin brother. Where it helped me sort of begin to have those deeper questions and to connect it to something bigger than me in terms of my purpose and my life being of purpose. And then lastly, therapy. My Bible is great. It is not a therapist. I do believe people should get professional help, people who have training, the language, the tools, to be able to have a dialogue with you that is not a family member, frankly, who has an objective sense and a care for you, that can equip you with the tools you would need, not just even for one loss, but for all the things that may come. And so I talk openly about the importance of therapy for anyone, and I think all of us in this room have experienced trauma, and the importance of actually relying on professional help during those seasons. And I didn't have my first therapist until after I graduated Princeton, and I remember the first time I was living in New York. She was wonderful. I think she also had shock on her face when she heard part of my story, that she couldn't believe I had never connected with a therapist prior to that. But it was also therapy that taught me that no, for example, is a complete sentence. So when someone says, oh, we'd like you to do this, no. And it feels great. So those are just some pieces that have informed how I've sort of gotten over and gotten through, and tools I go back to as new things come about, because at the end of the day, it's life. More things will come at us. The question is, how are we equipped to sustain ourselves in the midst of it, and most importantly, get through it? And when we do get through it, the joy and the sunshine, and my middle name is Joy after my biological mom, so I just have to stand in joy all the time. But what you see on the other side can blow your mind and is amazing, and that's exactly what's happened to me.
Princeton.
Yes.
What was it like for you to go to Princeton?
I love Princeton. I will tell you, I'm very proud of them in this moment in time, given all that's going on with the federal government. I'm proud of the stance the president is taking. I'm proud of his leadership and those who work there. I know Harvard is getting a lot of credit on a lot of things. No offense to Harvard, but I'm very proud of Princeton. But they took care of me. I remember when my father passed, at the time, I think I was taking 5 classes, the norm was 4, and I was concerned about whether or not I could pay for my books. And there was no sort of fund, or at least no scholarship, or I should say no loan or anything I could get for books. And I remember a professor saying, you should go see such and such in the main office because there may be some resources available. And sure enough, I did that, and there were a couple of alum who wanted to remain anonymous, who had put aside resources for moments like that. Some student going through something so horrific who would need financial support around little things, maybe even a flight home or something like that. In my case, I needed help with just paying for books. And I had exhausted my work study. I worked so much, they're like, no, you've maxed out. We can't even pay you work study anymore. So they just were helpful in me finding other jobs, but also ensuring I had resources. So they took care of me, and I just will never forget that. A real sense of community, just a deep sense of community, and I appreciated that.
And when was it that you decided that you wanted to go to law school, become a lawyer?
So I think I thought about it when I was at Princeton. I actually started off at Princeton as a math major. I loved math, was in the thick of it. This was before, around the same time, I think Beautiful Mind came out, actually, because Russell Crowe was on the campus. And then I was thinking, what are you doing? So I came back actually after my father passed and ended up switching my major from math to sociology and Judaic studies. So I ended up I majored in sociology, I minored in Judaic studies.
Judaic studies?
In Judaic studies.
Where did that come from?
Always interested in the relationship, Black and Jewish relationship, particularly during the Civil Rights Movement, also the history of the demographic shifts in Boston. My father growing up, my father was actually born in 1933, so he was 50 when I was born, so he was older. So he would talk about this history and historic changes in Boston, which always was just sort of an interest. And so my freshman year, I just took American Jewish history, and I fell in love with the professor in the class, and I just kept taking classes. So much so, when I decided to drop the math major, one of my professors said, you should major in Judaic studies. And I was like, what am I gonna do with that? And I appreciated being, frankly, the only believer Christian in many of these settings, having just real robust dialogue. But I was like, I don't think that's the path. And so what I did was sort of bring these two majors together to focus on relationships, and even wrote my junior paper on Boston, my senior thesis on something similar. And the rest is sort of history. Worked at the Center for Jewish Life. I remember the rabbi, and this is a detour, tried to send me to Israel under birthright Israel. And I remember him coming back, and at the time, Susan, one of the women who worked there, said, he wants to talk to you. I remember going in, he says, I'm just devastated. So we just unfortunately you can't go because you're not Jewish. And I remember explaining this, and I thought, wait, you actually tried and looked into this? But God bless you. I went later, but it was I just remember laughing hysterically that he tried, but just to immerse myself, but particularly in this Black-Jewish relationship, and especially during the Civil Rights Movement. And I think there's still something to be learned from coalition building from what occurred back then, particularly in the 50s and the 60s.
Right. You're such a inspiring role model. I assume you do speaking in schools, and particularly perhaps with heavy Black populations. How do the students respond to some of the remarks that you deliver?
So I get a lot of requests, and I'm noticing even of late they're sort of doing this. And I think part of it is, I know my story, of course, brings about inspiration, but particularly for whether it's students of color, people of color, I think even just poor people, right? People folks who I have to say feel left out and left behind, invisible, unseen. So if you're part of any sort of marginalized group, there is a response to my story that this sense of tragedy can be reflected in a leader and in leadership. And people are excited by that. They see the possibilities for themselves. And I would say especially young Black girls. For a while, I didn't stand in that. People were like, you're the first Black woman AG of Massachusetts. Wow. I'm like, great, I got work to do. it means something, yes, of course. I see it as frankly as a need to be very responsible in how I handle this role and how I carry it out, because I know I stand on the shoulders of so many folks who came before, especially Black folks, who for whatever reason could have had this position but didn't. So I stand in that. I just don't spend a lot of time thinking about all the times I'm a first. But I do know it matters to those looking, because if you can see yourself, you can then believe that it can happen for you. And so I see that response, particularly from young girls or parents of folks. And so if anything, I'm sharing more of my story than I have of late, because I see it as being inspirational for anyone. I often say it's not a Black story, it's not a person of color story or poor story, it's an American story of what's possible, frankly, in this country. What I hope will still be possible, frankly, in the years, in the months and years ahead.
Who are your heroes in life?
One person I lift up a few. I'll say two. One is Maya Angelou. I had the incredible honor of meeting her when I was in middle school in the 6th grade. And sadly, even with my great Boston Public School education, didn't know who the woman was. It was a relative of mine, actually a relative who I got to know because she was one of my foster parents, or I was sort of put in her custody. We're still to this day extremely close. I call her Aunt Dot. And she says, I want to take you to meet Maya Angelou. She's going to be at the Peace Abbey here in Massachusetts. And I was like, who? And she's like, I'm cutting this meeting, this date short, drove literally to a local bookshop, did a didn't even park, ran in and got a cassette tape. And it was a cassette tape of Maya's poem that she did at President Clinton's inauguration, which was the first. And it was so powerful. She's like, go home and learn about this woman. So when you meet her, you know. So of course I did, because I was a great student. So when I finally met her, she just sort of walked in, just regal. And it's not like she even had anything on that was maybe remarkable, but just a presence. So she just walked in. I didn't even take my coat off. I still have I have a picture. I have a coat and like gloves on. I didn't take my coat off, and my coat looked like Dolly Parton's The Coat of Many Colors. It had so many different colors. Green gloves, and like a pad and pen, because I had to do a report to get an excused absence, 'cause I told you I was a good student. So I'm just looking at her, and then finally she comes, and then she asks me to sit down, just like this. And she looks at me and she says, I just came back from Africa. I was in Ghana, and she said participating in a whole bunch of things, but in a ceremony where when an elder in the community dies, they go through a process of sort of taking the spirit of that elder and passing it on to a younger person, a younger leader. And they call that younger leader, that person's Kra, K-R-A, and there's an accent. And she had me write it down. I think she took my pad actually and wrote it down. And then she looked at me and said, you are my Kra. There was a video, I was like, what? And even then, did not get the magnitude of that, because I didn't know, just even if you read about someone, you don't know the power of that person. So of course I started following her career like I do like Beyonce. I'm just following the person, obsessed, like, wow. But I know the magnitude of what it means now. And I stand in that, I could get emotional because it's, wow. So when life gets really hard, I reflect on that moment and that opportunity that came about because of a foster parent, right? Just all of that. And then the second I would say is my aunt, who I call my mom. Her name is Lolita, we call her Lois. Her sense of faith is so deep and so remarkable. She models what it looks like to actually stand in not just the word, but to live it out. And like she said, what would Jesus do? I'm like, that's hard, or be kind like Jesus. But she stands in that and models it, which I think in a world of such hypocrisy at times when it comes to faith, I feel really blessed that I have someone so close to me that models what it actually looks like to see the humanity in other people, to live in such a way that they feel that coming across from you, and to just be kind and decent as a human being. So I lift her up everywhere I go.
We both know that the Attorney General's office is multifaceted, has a lot of different powers. What was the most important thing in your mind that you did during your first year as Attorney General?
It's a hard question. You know that's a hard question. That's tough. One. Well, I'll have to say, I think, I'm just going to reflect even from just year one. So we got a lot of a positive attention for actually suing a municipality. If you know anything about Boston, the municipality is Milton. It was in the news, at least in Massachusetts. And I saw it as, that's just what our job is. They're not coming into compliance with this housing law. Well, we're going to sue you. And it really took team members to say, like, no, that was a big deal. The state doesn't usually sue its own municipalities, right? And the magnitude of that. And I took some time to reflect on it. It wasn't just about enforcing this housing law, which we're still in this housing crisis, and how important this law is in Massachusetts to creating more housing for those who need it the most. But I reflected on just the exclusionary zoning, all of the history related to housing policy, not just in Massachusetts, but of course in this country. And the ability to use the law for good required that we do something really bold, and maybe someone would say risky. And I didn't hesitate to do it. And so for me, I think just reflecting on that decision, it may seem small in many ways, you just sued a municipality, but when you think about that history and historical context of exclusion, usually done through zoning, policy and practice or laws, to take on a municipality and all the sort of the hate and other things that came from the community, not everybody, was a big deal, and I'm really proud of that. And I think also, I just have to lift this other thing up. I think we have legal tools, and we often just talk about litigation. We have other tools. One is our grant-making tools. All the money that we get from settlements or other litigation efforts, millions of dollars where we can design grants in different ways. So one of the first things I did was look at the gaps in terms of Black maternal health. We're in Massachusetts, but we have the same inequities like any other state in many ways. You're still 2 times more likely to die as a Black person, Black mother, given birth, than your white counterpart. And so we designed a grant to go to community-based organizations that have a proven track record of working to close this gap, and gave $1.5 million to organizations all across the state, including outside of Boston, because Massachusetts people, oh, this is just Boston, all across the state. And the response and feedback we got, not only because we were the geographical equity, but the intentionality of not just looking at maternal health issues, but really being laser focused on Black inequities. The response was amazing, and the creativity to design a grant around that really brought in a new audience into the office who I think normally didn't see the AG's office as a part of their daily work. But I said, no, we do a lot of work in the health space, and this is just one example of that. So I was really proud of that grant. And other states took some ideas and did something similar.
So the housing is a sensitive, everybody talks about the need for more housing, and then when you try to implement it, there suddenly is resistance in communities and neighborhoods. So it brings to mind the broad question of what is your assessment of race relations in America today? Are we doing better than we did 10 years ago, 20 years ago? I mean,
Did we get these questions before
I mean,
and vet these?
I looked, my wife and I were early tonight. We sat in the courtyard, and we sat on a bench, and I spent 20 minutes watching students come and go. And it was a very different picture from my class of 63 in this law school. And, you know, from my perspective, there's huge hurdles still to go, to cross, and barriers to knock down. But, you know, we've come a long way, and I was just curious from, you know, your very important and sensitive perspective.
I'm like, how much time do we have? I'm going to maybe take it from maybe 2 different perspectives. So at the end of the day, when I sort of sit back and I'm up late reflecting on the work and really trying to turn it off for a minute to go back to the bigger picture, I see my life's work in many ways of not only maybe answering the question around my twin brother and I and how we went to just in two different directions. He ends up dying that way, and me, by every metric, I'm successful. Because at the end of the day, for me, the work is about breaking generational cycles of poverty, criminalization, mediocrity, not just for my two beautiful boys, but for other families. In anything that I do, whether this job or whatever comes next, but really breaking cycles. I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. My 8-year-old just turned 8. Right now, as I sit here, he's doing his Taekwondo belt testing, going for the green belt. I'm like, you're gonna do it. And then my 5-year-old, who'll be 6, Aiden will be 6 in December. And when I look at them, yes, come a long way in terms of opportunity when I compare it to my father. Father was born in Boston, 1933. By every metric, was extremely intelligent. I think to this day, he's probably the smartest person I ever knew. A+ student at Boston Tech.
This is your dad?
This was my dad. He was graduating class of 1951, got accepted to Princeton. I don't even think this is public really, got accepted to Princeton. He's literally, but also got arrested for his first offense when he was 17 years old. Didn't even know about Princeton. The principal of the high school, and at the time, they were saying, instead of assistant, the secretary, he's a secretary, went up to visit my father and said, what are you doing? You got accepted to Princeton University. What are you doing? And his response and perspective was, what am I going to do down there? As the oldest of 7, as a black man, he did not see Princeton as a way out of anything. Why? Because when he was already applying for jobs and opportunity, he was told in the city of Boston, even though he was born and raised in the city of Boston, I was born and raised in the city of Boston, that job opportunity is not available to you because you're black. This internship is not available to you because you're black. Didn't mince words, that was the reality of my father, born in 1933 in the city of Boston. So from his perspective, race relations were a total not good. From where I sit now reflecting on my dad's story and me maybe continuing where he left off, right, to go to Princeton, et cetera, how can I not say things have improved, including when I look at my kids or sit in this very room where we can sit in fellowship across these race lines and no one come in here and arrest us or kill you from sitting next to me, right? We've clearly come a long way, and I'm mindful of that. But then there's the other perspective. Right now in this country, you have an administration seeking to wipe out the history of black folks in this country. The history that actually Bryan Stevenson, who I also consider a hero and maybe a mentor of mine, I saw him recently in Alabama. She mandated that everyone go to Alabama and go see his legacy sites, which he continues to expand upon, to learn the history of this country, not just with respect to a transatlantic slave trade, but a domestic one that prospered even after we said the transatlantic one was illegal. What we did in this country to brutalize and to murder people that looked like me with no accountability whatsoever, the trauma and the legacy of that trauma still exists. And it exists in everything we do. And so till this country is ready to have a real, authentic, honest conversation about what took place, it will be really impossible to have a truth and reconciliation as we see in a South Africa, or as he says so eloquently, as we see in a Nazi Germany, from a Nazi Germany regime to what we're seeing now in Germany. A real acknowledgement of what took place. And I feel blessed to have the Bryan Stevensons of the world and some connection to incredible human beings like that, who thought he was going to Alabama to do wrongful conviction cases and death row cases, but is transforming the conversation and the narrative in Alabama. And those legacy sites, and there are many in Alabama still working against him, it's the #1 tourist attraction in the entire state. People from around the world going to see not only images, but experience the museum, but also the monuments and other sites he's bringing online that lift up the history. And you stand by the river thinking there's bodies in this river. And so when I went there in this season, I was inspired, tears every step of the way, inspired to keep fighting the fight, to do it with urgency, because I know what's at stake. I do someday want to eradicate racism in this country and the world. And similar to those folks who fought for me to sit here and to run for office, which I couldn't do without the 14th Amendment, to vote, as they try to eradicate the 14th Amendment, as I sit here, those folks fought and died knowing they would never see or experience the promise of the very thing they were fighting for. So I'm going to do the same, but I don't know that I will ever see the promise of eradicating a racist-free society in my lifetime. But I want my boys to experience that. And I think we have a lot of great models to lift up where it is possible and it can be done. Not easy topics for sure, not easy conversations for sure, but I think really important ones that we have to wrestle with, and hopefully the leaders in this space, this generation, you young and fabulous folks, given what you do next, will continue to spearhead that fight, inspired by everyone, including you, others who have done this work in tremendous ways. Yeah.
I've got lots more questions, but our tradition is to turn to the students, and we want to give you an opportunity.
Ask something light.
So we've got about 10, 15 minutes. Any student here have a question for our distinguished guest?
Hi, thank you. I maybe kind of naively think that everything's going to be okay in 5 years, that like time is running out for things, but what are you scared of like 5 years from now? What should we be working on?
Next. No, I try not to get so far ahead. And actually, I will just say today it's a long day. And I'm really, when I say honored to be here and feel the energy in this room, I can feel it. It's been a tough day. You know, I just learned that one of my attorneys today unexpectedly passed, which really it hit me, as you can imagine, because we know how hard our teams work. So I try not to get so far ahead. And maybe that's because I've experienced so much loss. I think you can get so anxious worrying about tomorrow. It's like, no, let's be present. And I think if anything, it's so challenging at moments just to be present. Even in this space, you may be thinking about where am I going to next with my dinner plans. Can we just be present in this moment with each other? Just share some energy and love and eye connection and connection, right? I try not to get so far ahead. I think what worries me the most is the federal administration. You know, we didn't come into this 2025 looking for a fight. We wanted a partner, including on things like junk fees, which we had one and then we didn't, so we had to just do our junk fees by ourselves. All those little hidden pesky fees. We just put on our regulations and they went into effect a couple of days ago. But you know, what's happening in our immigrant communities? In this narrative that every immigrant is somehow a criminal. We had a high school student going to a practice, about to graduate, detained by ICE officials. And I don't know if you've ever been pulled over, even if you were like speeding and someone pulled you, you still get nervous. It's traumatic. So I can't imagine what he felt like, and then was detained for a period of time while we were seeking to not only get rapid response to get him out, but then listening to his mother and the siblings and his father. And as a mother, their heart, like I could feel her pain of just please bring my son back. And he was doing everything right and still was detained, no criminal record whatsoever. I can't imagine. And with the Supreme Court decision we just got, which essentially just says, go ahead and keep doing it, racially profiling folks. So 5 years from now, no, I'm worried about what's happening right now. And this, I think, is a real opportunity, to our points earlier, of why we need really great people in public service. And I would say not just even as lawyers. If you've ever thought about running for office, I always say we need the unusual suspects. Maybe folks who never even thought about running for office. Maybe it's you. You have something to bring that's unique because professionally you have something unique to offer, or something personally, a personal narrative that's never been offered. We need more of that in this space because the time is now. And I think I'm in that every single day, and it became even more present today of how do you balance the work, do the fighting, but also self-care and true connection with each other.
Yes, over there.
Hi, Bob. I'm not a student anymore, but I am on the wait list at Princeton, so they just forgot to call. So I had to go to Columbia College like Bob. But I want to thank you so much. You know, what I find is there's so many people back on their heels, people of goodwill. Not only don't they think we can do anything, they're almost doggedly determined to feel that. And the only way through it is somebody who's overcome the odds, who's a person like you. You overcame the odds, you're doing real work, you have a sense of humor, there's joy in the struggle. You're like, I want to work with that person, you know?
I feel like that was a Jay-Z song.
Well, I should have gone into PR, but instead I tried to change things, and here I am. Anyway, so when you encounter that, you know, somebody who's should be on our side, but they just don't believe it's possible, what's the best way to get them to feel some of their own power?
I think going back to storytelling, so I've been lifting up in certain spaces, I'm sharing my story more, not assuming that people know, and asking folks to do the same. Maybe go home or go over you're going next and reflect on your own story. I don't care who you are, everyone in this room has gone through something, and something that was traumatic, something we may be willing to share or not. And I would say even find those moments where you went through something and you got through it, you thought, all by yourself. And now I remind folks, well, you have an AG that's on your side. You're not alone in it. And so the power of sharing our stories, I think, can get folks out of that space where sort of their feet aren't in the cement and standing in the lack of possibility or opportunity or losing their hope. I think that is important. If you are of a faith tradition, I tell people go a little deeper than my faith in particular. And I think this is true regardless of your faith tradition, and I'm sure there's many faith traditions in this room, demands that I stand in hope. Because it's not about me and I have control, but not really, right? There's a trust outside of myself in something bigger. And I've been really encouraging folks to stand in that and maybe even create more space for other people. And I'm actually having more faith conversations, even with folks who are not of any faith tradition. And they are feeling a sense of hope. I'm like, I'm going to pray for you. They're like, right here, right now? Yes. Yeah, you, let's go. I'm like, I feel something. Like, we should pray. Like, okay, sure, right? And so I'm encouraging folks to go deeper there. I mean, and that doesn't mean you have to go to church or synagogue or anywhere, or mosque, to just go deeper if you are of a faith tradition, or to connect. There's power in that for me. So I've been sharing that, and I've been really inspired by folks who then say, well, thank you for sharing that, because I too have a faith tradition, but I don't often share it. I don't share it in the classroom. I don't share. I wasn't in my Jewish classes pretending I was Jewish. And, you know, there were some people, you know, there are black Jews. I said, I do. I'm not, right? You know. So, and sometimes I was the only non-Jewish person in the class, and they were like, "What? Why are you here?" Right? What's going on? And so I found just real joy in just having these conversations, right? So I really encourage folks. And then lastly, turn off some of the news, social media. I can't even. I call them the distractions. Breaking news. Every second is breaking news. You could turn it off probably for a week. You didn't miss anything. You just, and even with social media, is it real? Isn't? And I often say, if I weren't in this role, I don't know that I would be on any social media platform. You have to, as NCAA coach said recently, you have to protect your peace. So for me, that means occasionally turning off the news and just monitoring what we're bringing in. Because even if you were exposed to it, it can have a traumatic effect. So the same is true for people you surround yourself with, or the people who pull out of you instead of pouring into you. So just really what we attach ourselves to. Read a good book. I started reading more fiction and going to the library, checking out books. Mom's like, you need to get into some fiction. You're just too much in the nonfiction right now. And reading random books. That helps. Right? So I just encourage you to protect your peace and find those things that work. If you need a massage every week, you can't afford it, well, get something that just does it so yourself. because the struggle is real, the cost of living crisis is real. But protect your peace would be the last thing I say, and surround yourself with folks who have that joy and optimism. They're around, they're in this space, and are doing it in a healthy coping way, right? I think is critically important.
We've got time for one more question. Yes. This young lady right here.
I can project. Hi, thank you so much for being here. Someone from Massachusetts. It's really an honor to see you speak.
A voter.
Yeah, I just started here 2 weeks ago.
Oh, great.
So thank you.
Come back.
That's the plan.
Oh, good.
But I'm just curious for many in the room who are looking to pursue careers in public interest law, in fights for justice where wins can feel so few and far between. What's your advice for career longevity and combating burnout?
It's a great question. So I'll start with the burnout piece. I've been reminding my team, the office is actually close to 700, half of those lawyers, other half non-lawyers. And I'm frequently reminding my folks to take care of themselves, but I even model it, like walking. I'll do walking meetings. I have a meeting, I will take the suit off and put on regular clothes, and if I'm late, the next meeting will get me in leggings and like a sweatshirt or a hoodie. And they're like, where are you coming from? I'm like, a walk. So modeling, I think, healthy habits. So whether it's walking, even my team, we had a virtual meeting once, and I said, y'all all look wonderful in these fabulous suits. Is there an external person joining this meeting, or is it just our internal team? And aren't you people all at home? I hope you have maybe like pajama pants on at the bottom. You're comfortable, because I'm not understanding. And who's going to court? No one. And so I was like, please do not wear a full suit on a virtual meeting. Just anything that would just take it down just a notch or two. Not the standard of excellence. Obviously, if we're in the office, but if we're doing a virtual check-in meeting on a Friday, leave that meeting and go for a walk or do whatever, right? And so just shifting culture a bit to encourage folks to put their health first. We even changed sick days to wellness days. It's not a sick day. Today you just need a day to be with your parent. You may have aging parents or kids, or something came up, or a healthcare appointment. I went recently, this is maybe TMI, my doctor said, was your last physical in 2023? I said, maybe. So just even those things that you just sort of, you put at the, health is number one, and just really modeling what that looks like, and also sharing my story and asking others to do the same with the hopes that people seek out the help they would need from colleagues or others has been really important. And I also believe in a flexible work schedule. I think COVID taught us some things about flexibility that we could offer to folks, including parents and others who have other activities that are equally or more important, frankly. And then I also name that having this job and frankly not taking your vacation time is not a badge of honor. I don't want people dying on the job, right? It's not that important. And so I really stressing that, I don't mince my words around that, I think is really important. In terms of long-term career, it is the most rewarding. I left Proskauer, and I had a great experience at Proskauer. It was a great firm to work at. But I traded in my Audi for the bus, and I was on the bus. We now have 2 vehicles because when I was a city councilor taking the bus, I'm gonna be late again because the bus hasn't shown up. So we got another used vehicle, but traded it all in and don't regret any of it. Because it was never the monetary resource or anything. You can't bring that with you. For me, it's a job well done, right? And really reflecting on what matters in these careers, even when we have the losses, you're still helping so many people in so many different ways. And we need more folks with compassion, empathy, a sense of excellence, real skill and substance in these roles. We need more women. We need more people of color. We need more folks who used to be poor and know what that feels like. Or folks who dealt with substance use disorder being at the table to inform some of the work we do. And we have a lot more spaces where we haven't had that reflection of the true demographics in any state, frankly. We need more of that. And I think once we have that, these careers you'll see are just amazing. And what you can achieve and get done to help another human being, there are no words to ever describe, and you would say this, what that feels like when you run into someone who says, oh, this case helped this, or helped save my mother's life, or helped my young person who was battling depression. They're alive today because of this. So I think these careers aren't about you, so just remember that. I'll just be really candid. I think there are a lot of elected officials right now who think it's all about them. It's not. The second it becomes about you, get another gig. This is about true service, and that service to others. So these are the careers that matter, I think, in ways that sometimes you have to figure out and then determine for yourself, but they're life-changing in so many different ways.
Let's give thanks to a very great public servant in this country. It was wonderful. Just great.